In 1969, humans claimed they landed on the moon, but more than half a century later, millions of people believe that never happened. Not because they are ignorant, not because they hate science, but because something feels off. The flag appears to move. There are no stars in the sky. The shadows don't look right. And once you notice these things, it's hard to unsee them. So here's the real question. If the moon landing was real, why does the fake explanation feel so convincing? Tonight, we are not here to mock anyone. We are not here to debunk with arrogance. We are here to understand. Why do smart, rational people doubt one of the most documented events in human history? And more importantly, what does this story reveal not about NASA, but about how the human mind works? Because skepticism is healthy, but misunderstanding is powerful. And by the end of this video, you won't just know what happened on the moon. You'll understand why the hoax theory feels so real, even when it isn't. Before we explain why the moon landing was real, we need to be honest about something. At first glance, it really does look strange. Most doubts about the moon landing don't come from science. They come from intuition. And intuition is not designed for space. Our brains evolved on Earth, in air, under gravity. So when we see something that breaks those rules, our brain doesn't say interesting. It says something is wrong. Let's start with the most famous image, the flag. The flag appears to wave. On Earth, moving fabric means wind, and there is no wind on the moon, so the conclusion feels obvious. But notice something important. The flag only moves when it's touched. Next question. Where are the stars? If astronauts were on the moon, why is the sky completely black? Those photos are taken in darkness. The moon landing photos were taken in extreme sunlight. Cameras must choose bright surface or faint stars. So the stars aren't missing. They're just invisible. Now look at the shadows. They don't look parallel, but the moon is not flat. Perspective bends shadows, just like railroad tracks appear to meet, even though they never do. Notice the pattern. The problem isn't curiosity. The problem is assumption. Let's go deeper. The Apollo flag wasn't a normal flag. It had a horizontal rod at the top. Without air, fabric doesn't fall naturally. It keeps its shape. When astronauts twisted the pole, they added energy. On Earth, air would absorb that motion. On the moon, there is nothing to stop it. So the movement lasts longer, not because of wind, but because there is none. Here's something most people miss. The flag never moves on its own. Touch it, it moves. Let go, it stops. That is exactly what physics predicts in a vacuum. Our intuition fails because it evolved on Earth. If the moon landing was staged, the photographs should expose it, because photos don't argue, they don't explain, they simply exist. And yet, they are one of the main reasons people doubt the mission. When people look at moon landing photos, they often have the same reaction. This looks staged. That reaction matters because it doesn't come from technical analysis. It comes from comparison. We subconsciously compare these images to what we already know. Movies, television, studio photography. And the moon doesn't look like any of those. The lighting problem. One of the most common claims is this. The lighting doesn't make sense. Astronauts standing in shadow are still clearly visible. Objects seem evenly lit, so people assume there must have been additional light sources, studio lights. That assumption feels logical. On Earth, that's exactly how photography works, but the moon follows very different rules. The moon has no atmosphere, no air to scatter light, no clouds to soften shadows. Sunlight hits the surface directly, and the surface itself is not dark. Lunar soil reflects light surprisingly well, not like a mirror, but like millions of tiny reflective particles. So sunlight hits the ground and bounces upward, filling in shadows. illuminating astronauts from below. The moon becomes its own reflector. On Earth, photographers recreate this effect using large white panels. On the moon, nature does it automatically. Why it feels too perfect. Professional studio lighting aims to eliminate harsh contrast, to make everything visible. The moon unintentionally achieves the same result. One extremely powerful light source. The sun, no atmosphere to weaken it. A reflective surface underneath. What looks artificial is actually extremely raw physics, but raw physics often looks unnatural to us. The star question, again, but deeper. Another major complaint. Why are there no stars? If astronauts were really on the moon, the sky should be full of them. But cameras don't work like human eyes. They cannot adapt dynamically. They must choose an exposure. The moon's surface in sunlight is incredibly bright, much brighter than stars. To capture stars, the camera would need a long exposure, but that would completely overexpose the astronauts, turning the surface into pure white. NASA didn't choose to hide the stars. They chose to photograph the mission. The stars were there. They were simply outshined. Strange angles and impossible shots. Another common question. Who took the photos? Some images look surprisingly well composed, almost cinematic. This feels suspicious until you consider how many photos were taken. Astronauts wore cameras mounted directly on their chests. They weren't framing shots. They were moving. Hundreds of photos were taken in a short period of time. We only see a tiny fraction, the best ones. This creates an illusion. We see intention where there was selection. Quality that seems too good. People often say, "These photos look too good for 1969. But film photography was already extremely advanced. High-resolution film existed long before digital sensors. Film doesn't pixelate, it doesn't compress. It simply records light. NASA used some of the best cameras and film available at the time, because failure was not an option. Why photos don't end the debate? So why don't these explanations convince everyone? Because images are processed emotionally first. Logic comes later. If someone already suspects deception, every unexplained detail becomes evidence. Not of fraud, but of expectation. Photos don't prove a hoax, but they also don't convince skeptics. So we need to move to something that doesn't rely on interpretation. Technology. If the moon landing was fake, how exactly was it done? Not as a theory, not as an idea, but as an operation. Most hoax theories stop too early. They say, NASA filmed it, and never ask what that would actually require. Faking is also engineering to fake the moon landing. You wouldn't just need a film set, you'd need a complete parallel mission, a mission that produces realistic data, in real time, consistently, every second. The rocket problem. The Saturn V rocket launched. That part is not disputed. Millions of people saw it, not on television, in person. The rocket didn't disappear. It didn't turn around. It left Earth and did not return for days. So where did it go? If the mission was fake, the spacecraft would still need to go somewhere, into orbit, into deep space, and stay there. The tracking problem. The spacecraft was not invisible. It was tracked by NASA, by universities, by amateur radio operators, by other countries. Some of them were geopolitical rivals. They had every incentive to expose a lie, yet they all detected the same signals, moving away from Earth, then returning. The communication problem. The communication wasn't pre-recorded. It was two-way, with delays. Those delays matched the changing distance, second by second. To fake that, you'd need to simulate a spacecraft's position in space and adjust every response accordingly. In 1969, without modern computers. The data problem. The Apollo missions generated enormous amounts of telemetry. Engine burns, fuel usage, course corrections, life support data, all internally consistent, all matching physical models. A fake doesn't just need to look real, it needs to behave real. The human problem. Thousands of people worked on Apollo. Engineers, scientists, technicians, across multiple organizations, across multiple countries, over many years. Secrets of that scale. Don't survive, they fracture, they leak. This one didn't. The final irony. Here's the irony most people miss. To fake the moon landing, you would need technology on the same level, coordination on the same level, precision on the same level. As actually going, you don't simplify the challenge, you double it, which leads to an uncomfortable conclusion. The hoax theory is harder to believe than the mission itself. Transition. So if the technology argument collapses, why does the belief remain? Why does it feel convincing? To answer that, we need to stop talking about machines and start talking about minds. The hoax theory survives because it's not about rockets. It's about people. Humans don't calculate truth. We build stories. Conspiracies offer hidden knowledge. You are awake. Add distrust, add identity, add community. Belief becomes resistant. Facts demand effort. Conspiracies offer simplicity. Believing a conspiracy doesn't make someone foolish. It makes them human. In July 1969, 2 humans stood on the moon, not because it was easy, not because it was safe, but because it was possible. The moon landing wasn't fake, but the feeling that it was tells us something very real about how we see the world. If you enjoy stories that don't just answer questions, but examine why we ask them, this channel is for you. Subscribe, because space is vast, but the human mind is even more complex.